So friends, as we were discussing, today we return to the Iranian Revolution and the Cold War that began spreading across the Muslim world after it. By February 1979, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi had already left Iran and taken refuge in Egypt. On the streets of Iran, the military and the masses were facing each other. Feminist groups, religious factions, and revolutionary forces all shared one major fear: that a counter-revolution might emerge and reverse everything that had been achieved. This fear was not imaginary. The CIA had already once engineered a coup in Iran, overthrowing Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh and restoring the Shah to power. Because of this history, suspicion toward American intelligence was deeply rooted among the revolutionaries. Left-leaning and pro-Soviet groups openly rejected any association with the United States, but even Islamic revolutionaries were uneasy. Amid this tense environment, Ayatollah Khomeini made a decisive move. He chose to immediately return to Iran from exile in France. Why the urgency? History tells us that when a struggle fails, its participants blame each other. But when a movement succeeds, divisions appear over leadership and direction. The Iranian Revolution was no exception. After the Shah's departure, several influential leaders emerged, each wanting to shape Iran's future according to their own vision. Ayatollah Khomeini was undoubtedly the most powerful figure, but he was not alone. Ayatollah Taleghani, for example, was immensely popular and had spent nearly 15 years in prison before the revolution. Alongside him were Marxist guerrillas, Islamic modernists, and nationalist factions, all hoping to influence the new Iran. What was unclear at the time was Khomeini's true plan. Did he envision a modern Islamic state mixed with socialism and feminism as some of his allies hoped? Or did he intend to build a strict traditional Islamic system? The international media and even the Muslim world had no clear answer. That uncertainty disappeared quickly. When Khomeini landed near Tehran at Mehrabad Airport, he was first taken to a girls' school that had been designated as a temporary revolutionary headquarters. But within hours, a new reality emerged. Outside the building stood hardline clerics and Khomeini's closest allies, led by Ayatollah Beheshti. These figures redirected Khomeini to another, already prepared headquarters, signaling that power was firmly in the hands of the religious hardliners. For liberal and leftist revolutionaries who had returned with Khomeini from France, this was a shocking moment. They suddenly realized that Khomeini had never truly belonged to their camp. His vision for an Islamic state had long been shared privately with his hardcore supporters through speeches and writings. Those who believed the revolution would remain pluralistic were now sidelined. Meanwhile, groups like Fadayin-is-Islam, followers of Khomeini since the 1940s, celebrated openly. These were the ideological heirs of Nawab Safavi, known for assassinating secular intellectuals and government officials before being executed under the Shah. As chaos intensified, street battles erupted. Fighters trained in Palestinian camps clashed with remnants of the Shah's forces. Bodies began to fall on both sides. On 11 February 1979, a large portion of the Iranian military declared neutrality. Soon after, Sadek Kalkali was appointed revolutionary judge. He began executing former regime officials at a terrifying pace. Hundreds were executed. Bodies were displayed publicly. This period later became known as Iran's Reign of Terror. Kalkali earned the nickname the Hanging Judge. While many were horrified, others celebrated, believing that enemies of the Islamic Revolution were finally being punished. Among the most satisfied figures was Yasser Arafat, leader of the Palestinian Liberation Movement. He openly claimed that without training Palestinian fighters had provided to Iranian revolutionaries, the Shah could never have been overthrown. Despite security risks, Arafat decided to visit Iran immediately. Fearing assassination, he traveled secretly with Syrian President Hafez al-Assad's help. On 17 February 1979, Arafat landed in Tehran alongside Mahmoud Abbas. Initially, Iranian air traffic control denied landing permission. To avoid Israeli or intelligence threats, Arafat's identity was hidden. But an Iranian revolutionary pilot recognized him through the aircraft window. Arafat's iconic appearance made him impossible to miss. Permission was granted. Arafat received a historic welcome. Ayatollah Khomeini embraced Arafat, and Arafat famously declared, "The Palestinian Revolution has arrived in Iran." Crowds erupted in chants, "Today Iran, tomorrow Palestine." Soon after, the Israel embassy in Tehran was shut down and handed over to the Palestinians, a symbolic moment that electrified the Muslim world. At this moment, a Shiite Iranian cleric and a Sunni Arab leader stood united on one platform. Sectarian differences meant nothing. A shared enemy and shared struggle bound them together. But behind the scenes, a quiet rivalry had already begun. That hidden tension between Khomeini and Arafat, unseen by cheering crowds, would later reshape Middle Eastern politics and contribute to the deep divide between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And friends, this was only the beginning. During this grand reception, while crowds below were chanting slogans in support of Iran and Palestine, a quiet rivalry was already taking shape on the stage itself. On one side, Arafat believed the Iranian Revolution had succeeded largely because of Palestinian training and support. On the other, Khomeini felt that Iran's revolutionary success had positioned him to guide liberation movements across the Muslim world, including Palestine. The difference did not stop at perception. Khomeini advised Arafat to transform the Palestinian struggle from a nationalist movement into a purely Islamic jihad, framing it as Islam versus non-Muslim forces. Arafat, however, was a nationalist leader, deeply influenced by socialist and secular ideologies. His movement included people with modern lifestyles and political diversity, something Khomeini strongly opposed. After the revolution, Iran had already banned Western dress codes and liberal social norms. Arafat rejected this advice. History later showed the impact of this disagreement. While Arafat did not accept Khomeini's vision, movements like Hamas later emerged in Palestine, closely aligned with the Islamic resistance model Khomeini had proposed. Similar Islamic movements also appeared across the region, reshaping Middle Eastern politics. After concluding his visit, Arafat left Iran, carrying with him admiration, but also a hidden sense of rivalry. The very next day, another significant delegation arrived in Tehran, this time from Pakistan. The chartered flight included representatives from Jamaat-e-Islami, led by its then-chief Mian Tufail Mohammed, along with members of Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamist organizations. Rumors even suggested the presence of individuals from Saudi Arabia. These leaders praised Khomeini and declared the Iranian Revolution historic victory for Islam. However, two key agendas were quietly presented, one promoting pan-Islamism and the other seeking Iranian support against regional regimes. Egyptian Islamist leaders went further, proposing that Khomeini take on a leadership role over Islamic movements worldwide, almost like a modern caliph. Khomeini neither openly accepted nor rejected this idea. Being from a Shiite background, representing a minority within the Muslim world, and due to strategic calculations, he avoided committing to such a role. At the same time, Khomeini maintained strong ties to Syria's Hafez al-Assad, who had been one of the first leaders to recognize the new Iranian government. As a result, momentum began building. Islamic movements across the Muslim world felt energized by the Iranian Revolution. Leaders like Sayyid Qutb, Abul Ala Maudi, and Imam Khomeini were now viewed as ideological pillars of a global Islamic revival. Their writings were circulated, studied, and even included in educational material inside Iran. Many modern Islamic movements, whether labeled revolutionary, militant, or revivalist, were heavily influenced by these thinkers. However, despite global enthusiasm, Iran itself was still unstable. Leftist groups, secular nationalists, and liberal clerics opposed Khomeini's vision of an Islamic state based on strict Sharia law. Street protests erupted. To counter them, Khomeini's supporters organized revolutionary youth groups who enforced Islamic norms by force. Armed Marxist factions also took up weapons, inspired by Che Guevara and communist ideology. Interestingly, the slogan "Death to America" was first raised by these leftist groups, later adopted and amplified by Khomeini's camp. Eventually, the leftist forces collapsed. Khomeini's supporters were more organized, disciplined, and backed by religious legitimacy. Prominent clerics like Ayatollah Talagani soon died under mysterious circumstances, while others were silenced, imprisoned, or forced into isolation. Many of Khomeini's liberal allies, including those who had returned with him from France, were shocked. They had never imagined this version of the revolution. Prime Minister Mehdi Bazargan, appointed by Khomeini himself, attempted to draft a semi-secular constitution inspired by democratic values. It proposed limited clerical authority and equal rights. Khomeini rejected it outright. Instead, a new constitution was introduced, centered on vilayat-i-faqih, granting absolute authority to a supreme leader. This leader had more power than elected officials, controlled the military, approved candidates, and could remove governments at will. This marked the birth of a theocratic dictatorship, something many revolutionaries had never fought for. Resistance collapsed quickly. Many opponents were executed, imprisoned, or forced into silence. Then came two major events that pulled America and Saudi Arabia directly into Iran's revolutionary aftershocks. First, U.S. President Jimmy Carter allowed the Shah to enter America for medical treatment. This enraged Iranian revolutionaries. On 4 November 1979, radical students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, demanding the Shah's extradition. Inside were 66 people, diplomats, staff, and suspected intelligence agents. Eventually, 52 were held hostage. This sparked an international crisis. Crowds outside chanted "Death to America," and posters of Khomeini covered embassy walls. Iran refused to intervene. Prime Minister Bazargan resigned in protest. Diplomatic norms were shattered. U.S.-Iran relations collapsed permanently. Sanctions were imposed, many of which remain today. The hostages were held for 440 days. Their release coincided with the end of Jimmy Carter's presidency. You might recall the movie Argo, 2012, which portrays this crisis from an American perspective. This incident marked the first major blow in U.S.-Iran relations. And this is precisely where Saudi Arabia officially enters the story. That same year, another shocking event unfolded: the siege of the Grand Mosque in Mecca. This incident would permanently redefine Saudi-Iran relations. But that, friends, is a detailed story of its own, involving internal Saudi politics, regional intelligence agencies, and global power struggles. We'll cover that in the next episode.